This is VOCM Open Line. Call 709-273-5211 or 1-888-590-8626. The views and opinions of this program are not necessarily those of this station. The biggest conversation in Newfoundland and Labrador starts now. Here's VOCM Open Line host Paddy Daly.
Well, all right, and good morning to you. Thank you so much for tuning into the program. It's Tuesday, May the 27th. This is Open Line. I'm your host, Paddy Daly. David Williams. He's produced the program. You'll be speaking with David when you pick up the phone to give us a shout in the queue on the air. If you're in the St. John's metro region, the number to dial is 709-273-5211. Elsewhere, toll-free long distance, 1-888-590-VOCM, which is 8626. So we were checking in on the Men's World Hockey Championships. Let's go check in on the Para World Hockey Championships. So Liam Hickey, one of the most celebrated athletes from this province ever, of course, a stalwart with Team Canada. He's in action at the Worlds. Canada's opened up with a couple of whitewash wins, 11-0, 12-0. Hickey on the score sheet. He's got a goal and 5 assists as of now. They've got China today to try to improve to 3-0. And, of course, like always, this will boil back to Canada versus the United States in the gold medal game. Just a quick reminder about Liam Hickey. So this is his 5th appearance at the Worlds. He's got a couple of silvers, couple of golds. He's been to 2 Paralympic Games playing ice hockey or sledge hockey or para hockey. He's also been to the Olympics in wheelchair basketball. So amazing stuff. Go get him, Liam. And of course, just inducted to the Order of the Newfoundland and Labrador. I guess last year? Yeah, last year. Another season in the books for the Professional Women's Hockey League. Minnesota repeats as Walter Cup champions. It was a best of 5. They won it in 4 games. All 4 games were 2-1. All 4 games went to overtime. On Saturday night, they went to triple overtime. And one of the players playing for Minnesota, Liz Schleppers, she scored the winning goal to clinch the Walter Cup last year. She scored the winning goal to clinch the Walter Cup again this year. So it looks like we might have a couple of Newfoundlanders and Labradorians eligible for the draft for next season in the Professional Women's Hockey League to join the likes of Maggie Connors, of course, playing in Toronto. So there you go. Another successful season. I saw this story this morning, and it's not someone from this province, but it's a Canadian. And this is a long-distance runner, an ultra-marathoner. Her name is Stephanie Case. She took a 3-year hiatus from that type of competition, had herself a baby, and so 6 months postpartum, she competed in the Ultra Trail Snowdonia, May 17th, in northern Wales. What's amazing about this story is there's 7 checkpoints along the route. At 2 of them, you're allowed to receive assistance from a support person for whatever purpose. But she not only got support from a support person at 2 checkpoints, she stopped to breastfeed. She breastfed the baby 3 times over the course of the 17-hour race. In the middle checkpoint, where she wasn't allowed to get any support, she took care of all of it herself, whatever that included. But ultimately, she won the race. On top of the breastfeeding pit stops, actually won the race 6 months postpartum. That's just a fantastic story. Way to go, Stephanie Case. All right, what's this scribble? All right. So there were people that were in contact with me from the community of Torbay when the story was broke that there was yet another concern or an issue, assault, bear spray and otherwise, at a field party that happened to be within the confines of Torbay. So the emailers were quite concerned that it painted the community in a very negative light. Well, we know full well there were people there from different communities, including St. John's, that were at that particular field party. And it's not unique to this side of the island either. So now they're investigating an alleged assault of a teenage girl at a field party out around Corner Brook. So I don't know what the assault looked like and whether or not we're talking about bear spray or weapons or what have you, but the RNC are looking for information. And if you have some, please share it. How are we going to get a lid on what seems to be a very different feature of field party compared to when we were growing up? Look, I saw some fistfights. Absolutely. And there were people underage drinking? Of course there were. Were there people using drugs? Absolutely. But the type of violence we see now is vastly different. And the conversation amongst parents of teenagers who might be going to some of those parties is also very worrisome. People are pretty stressed out. So how do you strike the balance between giving your child a bit of independence and trusting their upbringing and trusting their respect for themselves and respect for others to be able to go have a bit of fun around a bonfire, as opposed to deal with what these stories include these days? But it's not just Torbay, it's not just one community or another. They're investigating the exact same thing out in Corner Brook. Oh, and someone wanted me to put this back out there, and I think Rick knows where the Avalon Trailways is going to call this morning. It's about what people see in the community regarding ATV use. Of course, last week there was a headline when a teenager on an ATV with a couple of passengers on board passed the school bus, clipped a child. Thankfully, the child is okay. Minor injuries, we're told. But that is a major league problem. So every single day during the spring and into the summer, we will inevitably get emails from one community or another, one resident or another, talking about the never-ending deafening noise and where some of the ATVs are operating. And then, of course, you include the golf course gets ripped up and all the rest of it. So if you want to bring forward those types of concerns, and remember, the ATV operator, the teenager who clipped the child getting off the school bus, the parent was also charged with unsupervised use of a all-terrain vehicle. So there you go. All right. So this is a difficult segue, but when a year or so ago we were told that there was unclaimed bodies being stored in a reefer outside the Health Sciences Centre and then moved inside and a wall around it, when it was first reported by the CBC, it was 28 bodies, and as of yesterday, 26. So when the legislation came to be on the 1st of January, given the government and the Chief Medical Examiner, Newfoundland and Labrador Health Services, a couple of weeks due diligence to try to find next of kin. And then for the names and other pieces of information to be posted on the website. Nothing's changed. So the questions have been asked of Ron Johnson, who's the COO of the NL Health Services in the Eastern Zone. He says the process will be seamless. Apparently in the coming days, the website will be launched, finally. And he says that the process will indeed work the way it's intended to. Okay, good. And Dave Williams asked me this morning, so how many bodies have been claimed? I don't think anybody, well, certainly I don't know, because it doesn't mean that 28 a year ago, 26 as of yesterday, means that only 2 have been claimed. Likely more have been claimed and more have been put into this cold storage. Seems like a very cold way to talk about someone's loved one who's passed away, but hopefully that will work the way it's intended to. And for bodies that go unclaimed, we owe that person a dignified burial. So apparently they're out to tender, looking for a funeral home to be part of this process, and hopefully that will be awarded by the 13th of June after the tender closes on the 10th of June. But that was always a very troubling story. Hopefully it gets better from here on out. Okay. I think Minister Sarah Studley is going to be on the program at some point today. We'll get a status update on things like speed cameras, which I might be in the minority thinking they're a good idea, but I do. Then there's the concept of just how quickly the concept of counter service has been very quickly replaced with online services. And yes, some will be left behind. Now, I would suggest most people out there have the base knowledge of how to operate the very basics online. But some people will be left behind. And there were some questions asked by the opposition party of Minister Studley on that front, and we'll dig into that a little further with her. One of the items that they did talk about that really does kind of feel like unnecessary digitized world is if you want to go to the dump. So in addition to, this is coming from Loyola O'Driscoll, in addition to online services, in-person services should be available so people can access things the way that best suits them. Okay. When you have to send and receive an email to get access to a landfill to dump off your garbage, it seems to me that maybe that overcomplicates things. We'll see if we can't get a bit of a better understanding from the minister this morning as to how and why that's the way it is. So if you want to put forward any questions on that front, you know what to do. All right. So there's been plenty of conversation, and justifiably so, about the fact that the province does not have a disabilities advocate and probably should. Then we heard a story from out in Corner Brook that the only French immersion school there has accessibility issues, and consequently, people who want to enroll in early French immersion and have a mobility concern or accessibility concern, they can't go to that school, which is absolutely mindless this day and age. This is a very specific story, and we've reached out to the gentleman in question. For the first time in over 30 years, the call to the bar ceremony will not take place at Supreme Court in St. John's. Why? Accessibility issues. Blair Curtis uses a wheelchair, and he can't get in there. They talk about the very steep ramp and the elevators out of service. Courtroom number 1 doesn't have an accessible door. Look, the response from the government, I think I can't understand this. Well, first let's stick with Blair Curtis. He says, that's not going to work when I need to represent the client in that courthouse, when there's a disabled person needing to access the courthouse for a variety of different reasons, just as a member of the public. So he talks about what that will mean and how it will resonate with other people in the disabled community. All right. he's thankful that it's going to be held at the St. John's Convention Centre, but then the government in response, and let's see if we can break this down. At the same time, it's in quotes, at the same time, limitations remain with some publicly operated historical buildings and options to meet code requirements are not always available. I think that's fair-ish, but that doesn't change the circumstance for Mr. Curtis or anyone else out there who, for instance, used a wheelchair and has some thoughts about going to law school to be a practicing lawyer and Supreme Court, where inevitably you'll probably be presenting on behalf of your client or whatever the case may be, and can't get in there, can't navigate the Supreme Court. And yes, I understand some of the limitations with some historical buildings, but that may have a wider impact for the disabled community. Because remember, it's not just lawyers, it's the people that lawyers represent. And we do know, and of course disability comes in many forms and fashions, from hard of hearing to blind, or in a wheelchair, or using a cane, or neurodivergent. There's a lot of areas inside the world of disability and what the advocate do for the community, representing 1/3 of the population. But Mr. Curtis, they couldn't call to the bar in the Supreme Court to have him sworn in as a practicing lawyer in the province. I'm not sure that's good enough. What do you think? All right. So I see a story in the news where St. John's Mayor Danny Breen talk about the fact the place will be on wheels this summer. In addition to the visitors that come, and the numbers of booking travel is way up. Marine Atlantic is up like 7,000. So a few things there. You know, when the Prime Minister was talking about access via ferry to the province and the pretty high fees that people pay, and what that means for the cost of goods and services for me and you, the end consumer, talked about cutting the rates in half. Okay, campaign's over, everyone's sworn in, question period begins tomorrow. We can get into the speech from the throne in a second here, but we really need to see pretty swift action on cutting those fees. And the Prime Minister talked about cutting them in half or thereabouts, which is a good thing, even though Marine Atlantic is extremely busy regardless of their fees or their rates. Next step would be trying to understand how, let's just say, and I hope this does happen, what is that actually going to mean for the price of stuff? You know, because we import an awful lot of what we consume here, and I'm not going to use the 90-10 ratio regarding simply food products, but a lot of stuff. And what will that mean for me and you? Will it simply be additional revenue in the pockets of the companies that are responsible for transport? Maybe. Will we see any actual direct savings as opposed to traveling for work or traveling for fun and not paying as much on Marine Atlantic? But the major impact is on the price of goods. I mean, we've heard from the trucking industry. If you compare the distance traveled across Marine Atlantic versus the same amount of kilometers on mainland Canada, there is a significant bump to the price of goods, obviously. So let's see if we can take that on. All right, stick with travel. Here's Sarah Strickland in the VOCM News talking about Newfoundland Power has told the Diamond Group, who of course, quote unquote, own the Stephenville Airport, and with all their lofty promises of years ago, now apparently Newfoundland Power is telling them they're going to disconnect the power, which means there will be absolutely, literally zero ongoing at the Stephenville Airport. People roll their eyes at this, and I know why, because the promises were so aspirational and they were so far out of reach that nothing came to pass. Mr. Diamond finds himself in financial and legal problems. But what is the future of the airport? Is there a way to turn back the clock, put the paste back in the tube, and see if there's an operational future for the Stephenville Airport? Don't know. Sticking with air travel, I heard a news item this morning where, I don't know if it's funny, but I guess it was just frustration. An Air Canada pilot, while sitting in the cockpit, went on the PA system to give a pretty solid rant to the passengers. Why? Because, like many people who have traveled any form of fashion in the air world in the last while, the possibilities for seeing flights delayed and flights cancelled, and yes, sitting in the fuselage for extended amounts of time on the tarmac. That's what was happening at Vancouver International, and the Air Canada pilot gets on the PA. Right, your member of Parliament, went up and down NAV Canada, who's responsible for air traffic controllers, suggesting that NAV Canada is slow-walking new recruits. Why? To keep overtime high for current air traffic controllers. NAV Canada, of course, denies this to be the case, but the federal government holds all the cards here. If there is indeed any slow walking of bringing new recruits into active operations as air traffic controllers, which has led to some of these delays and sitting sometimes for hours on end on the tarmac, we can cure that quickly if that's the case. But this Air Canada pilot, I don't know what kind of repercussions he's going to face at the airline itself, but he was pretty frustrated in the passengers. You could hear a couple of giggles, and I guess they were just giggles at the frustration being heard over the PA, but I'm sure they were as frustrated as the pilot sitting there. All right, a couple of quickies. So today, the speech from the throne. And there's a lot of people really uptight about the fact that the King Charles, will be reading the speech from the throne. Hasn't happened since Queen Elizabeth II back in 1977. It's probably the most significant appearance of the monarch since 1982, when the Queen signed the Constitution. But it's a symbolic move. When you're talking about sovereignty and all the nonsense about 51st state, the optics and the symbolism of the sovereign head of state to deliver the speech is one thing. I don't have too staunch an opinion one way or other on the monarchy. I'm more interested in the actual, not only the meat of the speech from the throne, which again will simply be a vague roadmap for government priorities, but let's dig into some of those things. Number one, sovereignty. I don't think we have anything to actually worry about on that front, and there's lots of moving parts and complexities, but we can talk about that. Then it's things like interprovincial trade. It's about time that there's actually some movement on that front. I know there's going to be some protection of jobs and some exemptions that will be carved out. British Columbia just signed on a new arrangement with Yukon for the transmission of electricity into the territory, and that's going to take some time to finance and to build. There's been various MOUs signed between provinces in the country, so let's see there. Then it's about diversifying trade markets on the global stage. Okay. A big one for, I think, this province, on top of interprovincial trade, is the very vague reference to an energy corridor. If you hear from people in Western Canada, that's about pipelines. If you hear from others, it's maybe about the transmission of electricity. If the Prime Minister is actually serious about this energy corridor, which makes a lot of sense to me, what we're going to need is more than simply the utterance of creating one. We need to see some detailed plans. We need to understand what provincial jurisdiction looks like. We need to understand what the regulatory framework will look like. We need to understand the consultations with, say, for instance, First Nations, because that's part of it. But we really don't have much to dig into here. So if this is going to be a thing into the future, which is going to take years to build, we need to know all of those things. We need to know things like costs and who absorbs them. If it's an initiative driven by the federal government, then the federal government is probably going to have to play a very active role, not only in regulatory framework and consultations and assessments, but also financially. And I don't think any province wants to be bulldozed here. So you'll hear from Western Canada say, well, if Quebec is going to be able to veto pipelines, say, for instance, then it's a waste of time. But at the same time, with all due respect, I don't think any of the Western Canadian provinces want to be told that they have zero authority, zero jurisdiction in these important matters. So let's get a bit more detail there, because that will indeed potentially change the water on the beans of the MOU we have between us and Quebec, whether it be at the Upper Churchill, Gull Island, the two transmission projects, and what that will actually mean for how good or bad a deal that is currently in place as we fast track towards these 10, 12 definitive agreements. So let's see if we can get more there. Then after the speech, talk about the role, we're talking about housing. And housing, of course, one of the biggest conversations in the country. We're talking about a new strategy the government's going to employ called Build Canada Homes. Another layer of bureaucracy doesn't sound like the smartest thing to me, but tiny homes, modular homes, they'll all play a role. But it's not just about that. And it's not a very insightful email I got this morning. It's not just about supply and demand. It's about banking. It's about zoning. It's about city bylaws, the lack of mortgage products. It's about pushback from neighborhoods, the whole concept of NIMBY. So there's a lot more to it than what the federal government holds the strings of. So it'd be nice to hear more, because we need to attend to these things quickly. I know people need a moment to get adjusted to their new ministerial roles, but time is of the essence. We're falling behind on a few things here. So let's get some actual detail. And people will bemoan the fact there's no budget, but we can talk about all of that and more. Also, as pertains to the monarch. Look, when King Charles was sworn in as king, the polls were showing 63-65% of Canadians were willing to talk about the future of the role of the monarchy. Just for clarification, there's some constitutional responsibilities, regardless of what you think about the monarchy, But we don't actually pay the royal family, which many people via email are telling me we do, but we don't. The role of Canadian taxpayers, and there is going to be some security costs and whatnot with the King and the Queen visiting, but for the operations of the Governor General, for housing and ongoing day-to-day activities and events and the like, and Lieutenant Governors across the country, it costs Canadians about $1.55 per person per year. Now, could that money be better spent elsewhere? I would think so. Absolutely. But there's a lot of misunderstandings there. New Speaker in the House of Commons, good luck to Mr. Scarpaleggi. Big role. It's been failed by speakers into the past, so we'll see what becomes of that. Andrew Furey. It has not been in the House of Assembly since he left the post, and now new Premier John Hogan. So they gave him an internal leave of absence. But in fairness, that's not how it's supposed to work. The party is supposed to go to, and Mr. Furey is supposed to go to the Speaker to offer a reason as to why. Now, we know Mr. Furey is back into the operating theatre, not in the political theatre that is the House of Assembly, but that's still a formality that should be acknowledged. So we need the Premier, Mr. Furey, to go to the Speaker, along with the party, offer a reason, and get approval. That's just how it's supposed to work, and it should. All right. Oh, this one, I promised, buddy, I'd put this out there. Moose license allocations. So this person's concerned, he's out in Area 18, Granite Lake. So apparently they've lost about 100 licenses for the local resident pool over the last few years. So this year, 200 resident licenses, 150 for non-resident. He says it doesn't seem fair. He's asking me to find out the process, which I will attempt. But that's been happening for a few years. Well, people ask, hey, why are out-of-province hunters getting so-called more and more preference year over year than the local hunters? It's a good question. We're on Twitter. We're VOCM Open Line. Follow us there. Email address is openline@vocm.com. When we come back, let's have a great show. Renee's going to kick it off, talk about the fire in Adams Cove, and then you. Don't go away. Welcome back to the show. Let's begin on line number one. Speaking to the Liberal member from Mount Sion. She's the Minister of Government Modernisation and Service Delivery. That's Sarah Studley. And good morning, Minister Studley. You're on the air.
Good morning, Patty. How are you?
I'm doing okay. Thanks for making time for the show. How are you?
Excellent, thank you, and a pleasure to join you.
I think I probably should start with what the definition of government modernization is, but let's get some specifics on the table. Number one, do you have a speed camera update for us? Where are we?
I do, yes. So we have signed a contract with a vendor, Genoptic, and I'm very excited to say that they're actually in the metro region today, scoping out locations. So the department, working with law enforcement, put together a big long list of kind of the accident, say, speeding areas. And so Genoptic are an expert in administering, speed cameras. So they do all the speed cameras in Ontario. They do them in Edmonton, Quebec, some of the United States, like Florida. So they know a lot more about this than we do. Than I do, certainly. I'm kind of learning from them. And so they're going around looking at the potential identified spots, I guess problem areas, and they're looking at, the angles and the camera angles and the wind speed and the cell and all those things to try and just work out which of these places will be successful. Because there are things I didn't even think about, like they want to make sure that if there's a camera taking pictures of license plates, that someone's house is not right in that picture as well. So there's all kinds of nuances like that they are currently. So you might see a crew around today around the Avalon. They're starting here and they're scoping out a big long list of locations that our department put together with the law enforcement to just figure out where, based on their experience, where they will be successful in leveraging the speed cameras.
So correct me if I'm wrong, their responsibility after winning the contract is to install the cameras, to maintain the cameras. They're in charge of administrating the tickets that'll be sent out. What would be the role after the ticket is sent out? Because inevitably some people won't pay. We see all the unpaid fines into the past. So what is their role beyond what I just said?
So the other thing that they're doing is if someone contests the ticket, they will actually go and to court, for example, and be the expert witness. So they will, in terms of the law enforcement process, they'll go and be there when someone contests the ticket. So that kind of support. So we're still, obviously, it's been a big project with Justice and Public Safety. They're hiring additional staff to accommodate the change in volumes that we're expecting in traffic court. And so this is kind of the first. We're trying to take it slow and steady now to make sure we've done a very thorough work with Justice and Public Safety in terms of the design of this system. And Genoptic, they're experts in doing this as well. So they're looking at the locations right now, and then I'm going to say over the summer we will start to see some of those 10-speed cameras, go up in consultation with municipalities. And then so they will do the contesting tickets in traffic court. So currently, we are maintaining our existing. They're also going to send out the tickets in the mail. After that, the current processes stand. So in terms of paying your ticket, all that stuff stays as it currently is. We do have a few other improvements in the system that we're working on behind the scenes. I didn't want to hold up speed cameras with any of these other things. One of them is like online tickets, for example. So, if you're an active user in MyGovNL, and we know that, then we're going to look at, now this is not right away, but in the future, sending you an electronic ticket versus a ticket in the mail. So there's a few enhancements that we're looking at rolling out after the successful end-to-end implementation of speed camera. And putting up the camera is the easy part. The tricky part is the flow through of data and the privacy, and then the justice system, and then people will, as they should, contest tickets, and then the outcome of that. And so once we see the whole cycle there in place and running well, then we're going to start to layer on different improvements and changes.
People would inevitably try to game the system here. You can buy license plate covers that are a little bit opaque. You can still see it, but a camera might not be able to detect it. Then we've got the plates people still go around with all the paint is peeled off. What's the approach to deal with that? Because you know full well, folks who have a heavy foot, they're going to buy a license plate cover. So what's the strategy?
So that's an excellent question. It's not lawful to cover your license plate with any kind of cover or to make it to change the color. So that's an enforcement issue. I have heard anecdotally that law enforcement have been upping their game in terms of giving out tickets for people who have covered their license plates. We don't tell law enforcement how to do their job in that way, but that's certainly a fair discussion point that people are having.
This might not be your ballywick, but in the world of unpaid fines, and we know there's tens of millions of dollars, and not all necessarily for traffic violations, but lots of it is. So there was some talk with your government about creating some sort of strategy regarding community service, whether it be cleaning up garbage or cleaning up graffiti as a way to pay your fine if and when you can't or won't pay your fine. Is that still something that's in the works?
I haven't been in any meetings on that recently. We are, as a government, I think we recognize that there's too many unpaid tickets and fines. And, I've had discussions with new and previous ministers of Justice and Public Safety about that, and that I know that is something we need to solve. There's a few different levers we can pull with that. And obviously, with speed camera tickets now, we're adding more potential volume to that, and we don't want to let this problem fester, obviously, because it's revenue to the Crown. So it is certainly something that is top of mind for numerous departments at the moment.
Let's get into a question that was asked by Mr. O'Driscoll in the House. Talking about online services, inevitably most people will be savvy enough and use technology enough to do some very simple day-to-day activities, but not everybody. So counter service has really diminished over the past number of years. Mr. O'Driscoll is saying, we need to meet folks where they are. And what's your reaction to that? Because I know there's people listening to this program this morning that even if they have to get an email approval to go to the dump, which sounds like an unnecessary piece of bureaucracy to me, what do you say to those folks who still yearn for some counter service?
So, the government has counter services in a range of different departments across the province. We have our government service centers. Recently, I was immigration, population growth and skills, and I learned, I didn't realize, they have 19 employment centers across the province. And so in no way are we removing that in-person service. I will say that, for example, let's say I'm a pro, given the number of online traffic and the transactions that occur online, we are able to free up some staff to now do things like speed camera tickets. So we have nearly two full-time staff in our motor registration building who will be focused on, auditing of the speed camera program, working with the vendor, and so alleviating some of that, the busyness, I guess, from when people want and can do something online, opens up some room for new things like speed camera administration. So I'm not increasing the size of my department by 2 people. Those are, I guess, that's a room that was created given efficiencies in our programs. But in no way are we reducing in-person services or we're not closing branches or anything like that. I think my aim is to meet people's expectations. People expect that they can make a simple change to their policy. I recently transferred my vehicle online, and I was just blown away by how easy it was. And the deal, I was speaking to a controller at a dealership yesterday, and they were gushing about how amazing the online, from a dealer perspective, how that works and how, I guess, efficient it is. And so I think there are a lot of benefits in terms of meeting people where they are, and they expect to be able to do things easily online. And so we have to, we're there in a lot of areas, and we also have to up our game in other areas.
For people that use email, it's easy enough to send an email and get an email reply to grant access to a landfill or a dump. I don't know if that decision comes from your department, but why have we gone down that particular road? Like, what's gained by government insofar as control or oversight or monitoring of people who simply want to drop off some old backyard grout to the landfill?
So that's something I've recently learned a little bit about. That's not the provincial government. That would be the regional service boards. I can't really speak to that, but I've offered to kind of help out if there's anything that we can do to help. And that is something that we are in discussions on, I will say.
Yeah, that feels like it's maybe unnecessary. We'll leave it at that this morning, Minister Studley, but next time we'll reach out again and talk about training opportunities for public sector workers and how we're using artificial intelligence, and not like at the hospital and doing some of that type of research, but fundamentally how is government incorporating AI, which can be helpful and time-saving, but it can also be problematic regarding personal privacy and, garbage in is garbage out. It's all about the algorithms. So I'm really interested to have that conversation, but I appreciate your time this morning.
I look forward to it. Thank you, Paddy.
Thank you. Bye-bye. As Minister Sarah Studley, Government Modernisation. Let me make sure I get this right. Minister of Government Modernisation and Service Delivery. Let's take a break. Renee, you are next to talk about the fire in Adams Cove. Don't go away. Welcome back to the show. Let's go to line number 2. Renee, you're on the air.
Good morning, Paddy. My name is Renee Baggs. I'm actually originally from Adams Cove, and my parents lost their home in this fire 3 weeks ago, and this is very emotional for me.
Just take your time.
Very difficult to talk about. Something I never thought would ever happen. But I know there's been a lot of conversation on Open Line regarding insurance and some situations that have happened there with people not having insurance. Mm-hmm. Some people have sent me some recordings and things of your show. I've never ever called into your show before, but I felt I needed to try to clarify. So my mom and dad, they're 89 and 86, and they lost everything they built in their life in this fire. So the day of the fire, I actually got to the house. I know I wasn't supposed to be there, but I walked the tracks from Blackhead. The fire started by the cemetery in Blackhead, and from what I'm hearing from the community, this was started by a human being, whether it be intentional or accidental through the dropping of a cigarette butt or something. So homes were lost. The community is devastated at the hands of somebody else. This wasn't a fat fire in someone's home. This wasn't an electrical issue. This is at the hands of another human being. I know you've had a couple of calls. I think Trevor Parsons called in. He's actually my second cousin. He lived in the next yard to me. His parents also lost their home, a mobile home, the same as my home, and my parents' home was a mobile home. They also had no insurance. My mom and dad had no insurance either. There is a story behind that. My parents' home, just to clarify about insurance and mobile homes, Our house was not really a mobile home because my dad built pieces onto it. There was a concrete basement put under it that was dug by my dad and my grandfather. The home was over 1,800 square feet. So the house was put there in 1976 as a mobile home. Over the years, pieces got built on it. They were insured through Johnson's Insurance from 1976 until the mid-1990s. In the mid-1990s, someone came down from Carbonear. This was an inspector from Johnson's Insurance in Carbonear. My mother was a school teacher out there. Johnson's was who looked after school teachers' insurance and that. We always went with Johnson's. Johnson's came to the home and did an inspection. I can remember this. I'm an only child, and in the 90s, I would have been in high school. I was probably grade 11 or grade 12. An inspector came, inspected the house, said because it was a mobile home, it couldn't be insured because it had a chassis underneath it and it was movable. Mom and Dad were like, our home is not movable. There's huge pieces on it. There's a concrete basement underneath it. The conversation went from there. This inspector from Johnson's also told them that if anything had happened, they wouldn't have insured them anyway, even though my parents had paid money from 1976 until the mid-90s. After that, we did try to get insurance, and I say we because I have elderly parents. They're 86 and 89. After that, we tried with multiple companies. We could not get it insured. So it does upset me when people call in and these stories. I just wanted to speak the truth or our truth about insurance.
I understand that.
What happened to us.
And I'm really sorry what happened to your family. So it's not just mobile homes that maybe did not have insurance. There was also some, detached family homes that were also not insured. And far be it from me to criticize someone on that front. I'm pretty sure that's how I've approached this in years past. I have a different thought when it comes to community voting in favor of fire protection services, but that's not the case here. There's also the possibility, if you, say, for instance, buy a mobile home and it's deemed high risk, or it's like 20 or 25 years of age, you might not be able to get insurance, period, regardless if you want it or not. So there's a lot to this. What we also don't really know a whole lot about is who's actually eligible to avail of any federal disaster assistance funding. Nor do we know exactly where the province stands on this. They've made some vague reference to coming out to support, whether that be with compensation or whatever the case may be. So there's a lot of people just flapping in the wind here and not even know where to turn.
Right, and over the past 3 weeks, and it'll be 3 weeks tomorrow this happens, there hasn't been a whole lot of conversation, right, from government or anybody. I did reach out to the MHA, Stephen Crocker. I left a message. He did call me back, but there was no real information given to me. I have called a second time, but he was away, so I haven't got a return call. His, executive assistant, she called me back to say that he would get back to me when he was back in town. I also reached out to the official opposition, Tony Wakeham, I had a lovely conversation with, and he told me when the House was opened last, I know the House is now closed, the House of Assembly, they were pressuring government, the Liberal government, to give an answer to this. Would there be anything, any compensation, any help? I have not heard a whole lot or seen a whole lot in the news from our new Premier, John Hogan. I would love for someone to reach out to me and speak to me and tell me, is there going to be anything, is there not? This is not a situation, and I know everybody's situation is unique, and like you said, there are some homes that weren't mobile homes that weren't insured. My heart goes out to the community because the community I grew up in has been destroyed. I'm very sad. But I would love for someone to reach out to me, or any of us, just to tell us, is there anything going to happen? If not, so be it. But some conversation from anyone, the municipal government, the provincial government, anything, any knowledge or something to give us some peace of mind about something, or just so we can move on and figure out what's going to happen. And I know it's been kind of related to what happened in Port Basque. And I know insurance don't cover flooding and what happened over there. But for those of us, and I know 100% in our situation, myself and my mom and dad, we could not get the insurance. And our house did not burn because of our doing. The same thing as everybody else. Their houses did not burn because of their own doing. So is there an RCMP investigation? I'm not sure if there is. I know there's lots of chatter in the community. I've been there over the past 3 weeks, an awful lot. I live in St. Philip's because I've worked in St. John's. I've been there a lot, and there is a lot of chatter about what had happened. So I don't even know if there is an actual police investigation happening in this.
I'm told there is. But, I mean, we need confirmation from the RCMP. But to your summary point here, it is high time that we get some details for the families who lost their homes. So if they have insurance, and that's one conversation. If they don't, it's a distinctly different one. So I will see if I can't get the Member of Parliament, because we are talking about federal funds potentially, and I'll also see if I can get the Minister responsible here provincially to come on and give us some information here. Because I think the point you make is the one I try to make all the time. Even if the answer is not what people want to hear, at least then they know where to next. Because just waiting a few weeks or waiting a month or waiting 2 months and not knowing what's coming and who's coming to your aid or what kind of compensation will be afforded, it just leaves people hanging. The anxiety grows, the worry grows. We can indeed do better here. So if they say, no, we're not doing anything, that's one thing. If they say we are, then tell us what it is. How do we avail of it? Where to next? Give me some help here. So I'll try to get both of those people on this program to see what we can figure out for the folks up in Adams Cove.
I appreciate that, Patty, because the silence is actually deafening, as people say, right? Silence doesn't help anybody, like you just said. It just creates anxiety and animosity. And the other thing is, too, what I'm seeing, just to put this out there, this people having insurance, people not having insurance, and this conversation is causing a division in the community. And I don't know, I've picked up on it. Like, I don't care who you are, if you had insurance or not. There's no need for this animosity between people that things like this cause in small communities or any community. I just wanted to put that out there.
And it's natural. I mean, people are between angry and worried, and of course that leads to some spats that maybe needn't happen here. So, Renee, I will see what I can find out and get the right people on the show as soon as possible.
Thank you so much, and I hope I represented the people of the community to say what needed to be said.
I think you did great, and I think you summarized it very nicely. And stay in touch, Renee. How are the folks? Where are they?
My dad is with me. Dad is 89. My mom has dementia, so she has been in an old age home for 4 years. Okay.
Pass along my very best to your dad for me today, and keep me in the loop.
Thank you so much for your time.
My pleasure. Take care.
Bye.
All right, bye-bye. I'm going to get this one before the break. Line number 4. Tammy, you're on the air.
Hi, Patty. My name is Tammy Doyle. I'm just calling in today to report that my father found a carry-on suitcase on the crosstown last evening. So he figures that I guess they were coming from the airport, I guess. So if anyone lost their carry-on suitcase, they can give my father a call. His name is Don Clark, and his phone number is 728-9769. He will want them to identify the items in the case. There is some valuable items in the case, so we'd really like for the person to find their missing carry-on.
Where was this found? I'm sorry?
On the crosstown, going across St. John's, I guess the Mount Pearl, like the crosstown.
Yep, got it. So we've got your carry-on. You're going to need to identify the what's in the bag. So it's 728-9769. Thanks for doing it, Tammy.
Oh, no problem at all.
Good luck.
Have a good day.
You too. All right, bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Here we go. So that bounced out of the back of something. Let's see. Let's take a break here. Don't go away. Welcome back to the show. Let's go to line number 3. Julia, you're on the air.
Hello?
Hi, Julia.
Hi, how are you doing?
Excellent today. How about you?
Good. I won't take too much of your time. I just wanted to hop on here and let everyone know about our bingo happening at Jack Byrne Arena in Torrey Bay tomorrow, May 28th. It's in support of the Eating Disorder Foundation of Newfoundland and Labrador. Doors open at 5:30 and the first game starts at 7. Make sure to bring your own cardboard. It's $25 to play all of the games, and we have an $1,000 jackpot tomorrow. We have a food truck on site. That's cash only. So if you're hungry, bring some cash. And if you'd like more information, you can check out our Facebook at the Eating Disorder Foundation of Newfoundland and Labrador. The forecast says it's going to be a great evening out, so come on out and support a great cause. I hope to see you guys all there. And that's all from me. Thanks,
Julia,
Patty.
no problem. So when you say we, so you work with the foundation?
Yes, I'm the marketing assistant. It's a student position. I've been here for around a year now.
Okay, so as a student position, so are you working towards something to work in the nonprofit sector, or how did you land at the Eating Disorder Foundation?
Yeah, So I just applied. I saw the post on Facebook, and I'm studying business at Memorial University, and I'm focusing in marketing, so it was a great fit.
This is maybe a bit of a personal question, but what have you learned? Because unless people have lived experience or are working in the not-for-profit sector or working with eating disorder individuals, there's a lot of misunderstanding out there. Like, I bet you there's people listening this morning that think that eating disorders are teenage girls. Well, that's just not the case. So,
no, yeah, you're absolutely right. An eating disorder can absolutely affect anybody.
And what have you learned about working in the not-for-profit sector? Because, getting a business degree, I don't know where you're going to land as a professional into the future, but the not-for-profit world, it's difficult, arduous, complicated work. The paperwork filling out for grants and bursaries and subsidies and organizing fundraising activities, I think we take for granted just how difficult the work is in the non-profit sector. What do you think?
Oh, I completely agree with you, and I didn't realize the behind the scene works that goes on to having such like a foundation operate like this. But there's a lot of grant applications. There's a lot of work that goes into it, for sure.
No doubt. Give us the details one more time about the bingo before we go.
Yeah, sure. So it's happening at Jack Byrne Arena tomorrow in Torbay, so that's May 28th. The doors open at 5:30, and the game starts at 7. Be sure to bring your own cardboard. It's $25 to play all the games. We have an $1,000 jackpot. We also have a food truck on site. That's cash only. It's going to be a great evening out, so I hope to see you guys all there. And all of the proceeds go towards our programs and fundraising efforts.
Appreciate the time, Julia. Good luck with bingo
Thanks,
tomorrow
Eddie.
and throughout the summer.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Bye-bye. Just quickly before we get to the news. So I guess I don't know if I ever get surprised anymore sitting in this chair, but a little bit surprised with just how vitriolic and emotional some people are about the fact that King Charles is here and Queen Camilla's here and the King is going to deliver the speech from the throne. I mean, it's obviously symbolic, and people talk about, well, the leader of a foreign country or the head of state of a foreign country in Parliament taking on this exercise. It's been done before. I'm more concerned with what the government says and what the government does as opposed to this particular issue. So the Bloc Québécois, they're even going to not show up for the speech itself. Completely just not going to even entertain it, which seems like a bit of an emotional overreaction to me, regardless of what you think of the future of the role of the monarchy. And, if we're going to have a pragmatic conversation about it, we all do need to understand exactly what's involved in walking away from the monarchy. Because it can't be just as simple as saying, I'm sorry, King, you're no longer welcome. It's in the Constitution. So there's a lot to this. So on top of the Bloc just turning their back on it, then so be it. I mean, they make their own decisions. I'm not so sure why they're so staunchly anti-monarch. And like I said off the top, I don't have a big opinion one way or the other on the role of the monarchy. I don't pay a whole lot of attention to it. I know there's tens of millions of dollars a year. We don't pay the royal family, but we pay for operations of their representatives here in the country. But yeah, so a lot of people really reacting quite vociferously on that particular one. Let's take a break for the news. When we come back, we're speaking with you. Don't go away. Welcome back to the show. Let's go to line number 1. Good morning, Tom. You're on the air.
Good morning, Patty. How are you this morning?
Best kind. Thanks. How about you?
Not so bad. Patty, I'm trying to be quick this morning. We've talked with this numerous times before about the tax credit that's available for persons with disabilities. My phone on a daily basis, I say if I could put it on a hook, it'd be rung off, but it's a cell phone. I've got to charge it a couple of times, answering people's questions. As we've said numerous times in the past, the provincial disability funds that people are going to be getting starting in July, you need not apply. You need to have the disability tax credit approved by the federal government, and you need to have filed a tax return. Now, I've assisted numerous people the last little while to get their tax returns filed. One lady had not filed a tax return since 2020, so that was a bit of a challenge. So I simply do not have the time to be going out doing tax returns to people. I'm sorry. I can answer the questions and things, but it's just getting too overwhelming. The federal one, first of all, I'm very, very disappointed in the new Prime Minister has not appointed a minister responsible for persons with disabilities. I've reached out to our MP and told them that that's simply not acceptable. Now, as people know, and I've been getting calls on it, starting in July as well, the federal government will be giving people with disabilities who qualify a $200 a monthly amount. And there's a whole bunch of confusion surrounding it regarding applications. And for some reason, the federal government is saying that they're working on an application. I don't understand why they're working on an application, because an application is not necessary. They have all the information on record, the same as the provincial government has. But to answer everybody's questions who's calling, they're saying that they need an application. I don't think they will require an application. But if they do, and if I find out, I'll certainly come on and talk to you and tell people how to find it and how to complete it. But for right now, it seems to be up in the air, and we've only got a month left before this thing is due and payable. But if it was any solace to people, if it's delayed, people still will be able to get the money in arrears. So hopefully that answers people's questions, and I'll stop getting all the calls I'm getting.
First things first, to avail of any of the disabilities supports that are out there, you have to not only file your taxes, you have to file for the disability tax credit. That's where everything starts. So please do exactly that. And like we've said in the past when we spoke, Tom, there's guaranteed plenty of people listening to the program this morning that absolutely do qualify, but don't think that their concerns are severe enough or prolonged enough. Have that conversation with your doctor, because I'm going to guess that there's a certain percentage of people listening this morning that would be surprised to know they are eligible, and there's plenty that comes with that disability tax credit. So please chase that. If you think that there's even a possibility, you're not wasting your doctor's time, you're looking out for number one. So please do that.
You're absolutely right, Patty. You know, and one of the big things, and the things I'm getting a lot of calls about, are children with ADHD. Children with ADHD are entitled to the disability tax credit. And my son has ADHD. He's been diagnosed with it since he was 3.5, and he's now 10. And I've submitted the paperwork to see if he will be approved by CCRA, because it has tremendous benefits. Not only is there the tax benefits that I get as his parent each year, but it also allows him to open up the Registered Disability Savings Plan, which is a big, big source of revenue that's coming from the government. So yes, if you feel at all that you have a disability that would qualify, and again, as we've talked about many times in the past, it just doesn't have to be a medical doctor. It can be your eye doctor, your optometrist, ophthalmologist, or physical therapists, or psychologists, or people of that ilk. They also can sign this form and get it sent off, so people will qualify.
Yeah, I mean, first things first. And so I know that you've been inundated with calls and emails on that front, and so have I. I was not like I'm an expert in the field by any stretch, but I know where to start. And so at least we can help on that front. Tom, anything else this morning while we have you?
No, that's all I have, and thank you again for taking my call this morning. And again, if people have been calling me, I don't think my call will dissuade them from calling. But again, I can't be out doing taxes. I've just done too many, and it's just too busy. But I can advise you over the phone and try and get you straightened away. And if you have any questions at all, please don't hesitate to call me.
Absolutely, Tom. Appreciate the time.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Bye-bye. Let's keep rolling. Let's go to line number 4. Say good morning to the Ward 4 councillor here in town. That's Tom Davis. Councillor Davis, you're on the air.
Good morning, Patty.
Good morning to you, Tom. I have to put you on hold, see if we can get a better phone line, which David will try to execute here now. Another couple of notes on the federal front. We do know that the NDP have lost official party status, which is a real problem for a party that absolutely has to rebuild. To get official party status, you need to have 12 seats in the House of Commons. The NDP have been reduced to 7. The interim leader, Don Davies, is asking for the federal government to acknowledge their status and to give them the required resources. So a few things that you don't get when you lose your party status is you have no privileges in the House of Commons for asking questions. And as important, if not more importantly, is you lose any federal funding for research. I mean, just think about the complexity and the heft of some of the bills and policies that will be brought forward. If you don't have the money to get people to help you with the research, then you're pretty much flying blind. I mean, you may indeed have some NDP members of Parliament that have some background knowledge of some of these big issues, and they can probably carry a lot of their own weight, but that is a big problem. So when I see people responding to social media posts on that front, you know, whether it be direct quotes from Don Davies and others, saying that the NDP destroyed Canada, the fact of the matter is, I think we're better served with more than just two parties. I mean, just look what it means for the logjam that is created, say, for instance, in the United States. It's just ridiculous. So there's a place for the NDP into the future. Will they ever be back to the Jack Layton days of serving as the official opposition? Will they ever have a hope, and you know where, of forming government? Certainly a long, long way away from now. But the actual voice that the NDP represents, whether or not you intend to vote for them, I think makes Parliament work a little bit better. And I do think if we get reduced to basically the bloc having some sort of foothold in Quebec and then the rest of the country just Liberal or Tory, I don't think that's going to work out the way people think it is. You can be dismayed with Jagmeet Singh and sticking around, qualifying for pensions and the supply and confidence agreement with the Liberals, but things will change in the future. Inevitably, different parties will hold the seat of government. And now, with a minority parliament, you wonder who's actually going to be on side. It doesn't look like the feds are going to offer any status to the NDP and offer the required federal funding for research. But what is going to happen with some of these things? Like, I mean, the first confidence bill, generally speaking, would be a budget. We're not going to get one. We're not going to get one to the fall. Plenty of people are justifiably asking good questions about why not, and whether or not that's something you subscribe to, I'll leave it up to you. But what it means for the NDP into the future, provincially and federally, if we just become the right and the left, so to speak, I don't think that's going to work the way people hope it will. Let's see here. Let's take a break. Don't go away. Welcome back to the show. Let's go to line number 1. See, we have a Clare one to speak with Ward 4 Councillor Tom Davis. Councillor, you're on the air.
Good morning, Paddy.
Good morning to you.
Better?
That's better.
Good. Couple of city things. Between May 27th and August 1st, there's lane reductions on Elizabeth Avenue between Westerland Road and Freshwater Road. And that's all to use more work for the shared use path. So motorists should expect delays and use alternate route where possible.
Okay.
As well, we're today in the Committee of the Whole, we're going to be announcing the temporary or the first step in traffic calming on three locations, but 2 that are in the ward, Smithville Crescent, as well as the east end of Empire Avenue. So just let the residents know that they're going to be installed. Hopefully won't take too long. And generally what happens is we install the temporary ones, and then there's a review done with residents, and then if that passes that test, then they're permanent next year.
So for traffic calming, are we just putting in speed bumps?
Speed humps, yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I mean, Smithville Crescent is one of those streets where it's pretty wide. And for some reason, when the road up here is wide, then people are more inclined to go fast. And of course, you add the fact that you've got a high school right there on Smithville, and some of the want for some high schoolers to have a very heavy foot, then it can be pretty dangerous and congested there. When school gets out, I lived on Smithville, so I saw it up close and personal. It could be a bit of a racetrack and very busy at certain times of day.
Yeah, well, hopefully it's going to slow people down. There's been some close calls with pedestrians, especially going around the corner at the top part of Smithville. So please, goodness, I mean, speed humps are a mixed bag. If you have a low vehicle, that could be a challenge, as well as if your house is adjacent to a speed hump and people don't slow down too much, you hear the whoomp, 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 whoomp. So please, goodness, this is going to solve that problem and make the street safer.
Is there any actual research out there as to what traffic calming works the best? Because, like, for instance, bumping out the curb, that doesn't seem to do anything to me. I mean, right on Newfoundland Drive on my commute, there's a bump out curb, and it just means that cars pass each other in opposite directions closer than they would have in the past. So I don't know if that does anything. The one that seems to work best, even just for me as a motorist, is when I've got the digital display of how fast I'm going. Sometimes we can get lulled in, and next thing you know, you're going 65 and a 50. So that's the one that slows me down. So is there research out there that speaks to what's most effective?
Well, again, a lot of the challenge we have is distracted drivers. and they may not even pay attention to it. But I agree with you. With everything psychologically, even smaller, narrower roads, it does have an impact. But unfortunately, when people are reckless or distracted, then it actually makes it more dangerous. So you're trying to be as effective as possible. There's no one-stop thing. I mean, I think that the cameras, which I was glad to hear Minister Leon talking about that. By the way, that company is a Canadian company. I think that's going to be really effective. But again, people who've got $10,000 worth of fines, they're really not going to care. And so again, you've got a certain segment of the population who each one of these things impacts. And when you stack them on top of each other, you'll never get to 100%. Unfortunately, because again, the biggest challenge we have in this city is not that we don't have all these measures, is that people are distracted. People are driving too quickly. They're in a hurry. They're using neighborhoods as shortcuts to try and avoid traffic. And all that is leading to very dangerous situations. So the main message would be, please, everyone, pay attention, spread the word. Realize if you're pulled over by the side of the road after running over a child, or you're in an accident or an animal, you got to live with that for the rest of your life. So.
Yeah, and I mean, it's, I guess, a little bit premature to talk about what it's going to look like this summer, but summers are always busier on the roads, and with what's anticipated with the influx of participating with and or families of athletes at the Canada Summer Games, it is going to be absolutely wild out there. So let's hope it's not wild on the road, simply wild competition inside the games themselves. So we'll reserve that for another little bit. Okay, is there another city issue before we get into whatever you called about?
No, again, just reminding people picking up garbage. We're seeing a lot of it, and it's great, and encourage people to keep going with that. And anybody who wants some help with a cleanup in their community, give me a call. Okay, yeah, so I'm going to take off the city hat now, and this is one of our deep conversations, Patty, so bear with me. The other day I was going down a rabbit hole, and I went to ChatGPT, and I asked a weird question. If you were the devil and wanted to corrupt the world, how would you do it? And the devil reference, just to be dramatic and just to give a figurehead to what I believe is happening. And I think it's being driven by what happens when humans lose their moral and the multi-generational guardrails that we built up over the years. And that's what it seems to be happening, and we're letting them fall down. But anyway, so here's what ChatGPT came back with. It wasn't about fire and brimstone. It was about distraction. It said you'd blur the line between truth and lies. You'd flood people with so much noise, opinion, news, outrage, clickbait, that nobody would know what's real anymore. And once people stop trusting truth, they stop trusting each other. That includes media, science, government, and neighbors. And this is literally like verbatim what I'm reading you. Then you chip away at meaning, make community feel inconvenient, faith feel outdated, family feel optional. You wouldn't stop people from loving. You just keep them too busy or distracted, to notice they were drifting apart. And like when I look around, that's what I see is happening. It's crazy. Like we're more connected than ever, but we're lonelier. We've got more convenience, but there's less contentment. Everyone seems overwhelmed. Everyone's pulling back. And I started to wonder, like, what would that do to the country long term? So I use game theory to have a look and see what happens. And game theory is like what happens over time when you make choices, and when trust starts to erode. That was what I put into the model. And most people think they're playing a zero-sum game, and that if they benefit, whatever they benefit from, someone else will probably lose, and that's kind of the way it is. And what happens because humans only really work when we work together. Most people don't really realize it. That's the reason we're in community, is because we were better off together. And as everyone starts pulling back, then you get what we call mutual retreat equilibrium, where no one wants to stick their neck out. No one goes the extra mile. Everyone does just enough to get by. For example, people don't have children, and therefore seniors don't have grandchildren. Important parts of society retires as early as possible or reduces their service levels to a much lower level than their community needs. You had that poor gentleman yesterday, Father Colin yesterday, talking about the doctor who just doesn't show up sometimes. And that mindset, if it keeps growing, quietly unravels the systems we rely on, which I think is what's happening. Even with GDP, economists have shown that trust and cooperation are major drivers of growth. And if we stay in this cycle of disconnection, we could see our economic productivity drop by 0.3 to 0.5 points per year. Over 20 years, that adds up to be around $800 billion in lost GDP. In healthcare, we have this perception of burnout, and it's pushing people out of the system. I mean, I've run into people. I played a lot of pickleball. Lots of incredibly talented individuals who are, relatively speaking, pretty young, and worked in healthcare, and they've retired. And basically, if this continues, we're looking at losing 10 to 15% of our workforce in a decade. And that's just not going to affect staffing issues that we talk about. It's worse care, more preventable deaths. And as we're seeing, skyrocketing mental health costs, because it's becoming like a bidding war. You got to basically bribe people. And what happens with this bribing of important people in society is again, because of this culture of being comfortable and maximizing your own personal enjoyment, then if you pay them more, they'll work less because they don't need to work as much anymore to pay their bills. And it becomes like this spiral, this death spiral, where you get less and less people working less and less period of time. Like every doctor retires now, like your stereotypical older doctor retires now. It takes 2 to replace them. And then also public sector productivity is taking a hit. But even in the private sector, as entrepreneurs and as business leaders stop mentoring, stop innovating, stop caring, we slowly fall behind. And I see it with my own activities. I mean, I'm really involved in the public sector now, trying to help on that side, but that means I'm taking away something from my business. So I'm trying to kind of reinvest my time back into that and try and find some sort of balance. But where we're seeing it the hardest, is mental health. 1 in 4 Canadians report anxiety or depression. Medication for mental health challenges through the roof, all through the rich world. Canada is including that. And it could be 1 in 3 by 2045. And that's personal crisis for families. It's also an economic one because, again, if you're mentally or physically unable to contribute to society or look after yourself, there's a cost to that. And it's not that people are bad. They're tired, they're distracted, and they're slowly drifting. And if no one names it, if we don't talk about it, we just think it's normal, and we create this narrative. And because humans have a tendency to think very short term, the long-term impacts, we don't see it. And we're seeing it now. You look around, everybody can see it. Everybody knows it's off. Everybody knows there's something wrong. But again, if everybody just looks after their own self-interest, it just keeps getting worse and worse. So, but the flip, go on, sorry.
Okay, no, just because we're running out of time. Yeah. I mean, looking out for number one is always going to be a keen feature of human nature. Now, whether or not people can, split their attention between themselves and their family and understand what it means for the impact overall in the community, or however people want to couch it, is a pretty deep conversation. And I am out of time, but this is something you and I have talked about in the past. I just want to give you a couple of numbers that I saw. There's an organization out there, a policy think tank called Carbon Brief, and they just did an analysis into China's footprint. For the first time in history, China's CO2 emissions are into reverse, which is really amazing. So China's emissions are 1.6% year on year in the first quarter of 2025, and by just over 1% in the latest 12 months. And of course, they're talking about supply come from nuclear capacity, wind and solar. So while people say, well, we can't do X because China won't do Z, well, China's doing better than we are on that type of front. They're in reverse, which is truly amazing given the amount of coal they've actually added to the grid in the last decade. So I just wanted to put that out there because I know that's a number that you would probably find interesting.
Yeah, and just to summarize, that's a country or a group of people that are thinking long term. They do 10-year plans, and their population's also starting to shrink. It's aging because of their one-child policy. A lot of stuff going on, but Trudeau got in a lot of trouble when he kind of admired China, and because of all the negatives they do, you can't admire them. It's the wrong word to use. But the reality is, the lesson there is we have to think long term. We got to take our heads out of the sand. And I was calling everybody, just do a little bit more, just do a little bit of soul searching, see if we can't all turn this around. Take care, everyone.
Thanks, Tom. All the best.
Okay.
All right, bye-bye. Let's see here. When we come back, Keith's in the queue to talk about supportive housing. Don't go away. Welcome back to the show. Let's go to line number 2. Keith, you're on the air.
Hi, how you doing, Patty?
Doing okay, thank you. How about you?
So or whatever. Let me explain my situation to you. What's the point of having a Residential Tenancies Act? Now, let me explain myself. I've been in and out of emergency shelter since October of last year. And then at the end of April of this year, I was offered supportive housing. I'll tell you the place, which is the Mercy House or whatever, downtown in here in St. John's. So they offered me that place at $585 a month. Now, with the Residential Tenancies Act, I always thought if you paid 1 cent rent per month or whatever, you should be allowed to have guests in and stuff like that. They do. They have a small room here in the corridor that seats maybe about 5 people or something like that. And when that's full or whatever, there's nowhere else for them to bring anybody. My concern, as well as many other people on this floor, is why can't you have somebody into your bedroom? It's like a bed sitting room that you have here with a bed, a fridge, a microwave, and a TV, and the whole works. We got no problems leaving our doors open or whatever if we did have a visitor with inside the bedroom or whatever, if they wanted to come by and have a look, and they do make their rounds or whatever to check everything and stuff like that. And I got no problems with that, but they won't even allow us to have that, right? So it's almost like being back in the emergency shelter itself itself, because we're not allowed to have visitors in to see us when they're in an emergency shelter. We have to go outside when anybody comes to visit, right? And my concern is that we're paying that rent to them or whatever. Why can't we have visitors, like I said, inside the bedroom and open up the door if they want to come in and check? They're more than free to do it, right?
So who sets forward these rules? Are these provincial rules or simply the owner or the operator of the home? How does that work?
The operator of the Mercy House. And I'm surprised the Residential and Tenancies Act lets them away with it or whatever. Meanwhile, when you go out into the community, if you're to find an apartment or whatever and pay your rent every month, like everybody does, or whatever, there's no problems with having visitors inside their apartment. There isn't somebody there to say, well, Jesus, you can't go inside the room or the apartment.
Do these emergency shelters even fall under the auspices of the Residential Tenancies Act?
They should, if you're paying rent or whatever. Anything I've thought, if you're paying rent or whatever, it has to fall under the Residential and Tenancies Act, and I believe they're getting away with it, right?
I don't think it does, to be honest with you, Keith. I'll look and confirm that, but I think these are policies that are allowed by the Department of Health Community Services and the Department of Justice. I don't think it falls under the Act itself. I really don't.
Okay. It actually should, though, or whatever, because it allows you. It's more. How can I say it? It makes you feel more at ease. You're not so stressed out all the time, right? You're allowed to have people in or whatever, and whether it be your son or your girlfriend or your wife or anything like that, right?
Yeah, now there are two different things. I just want to make sure that I'm on the right track here. There's supportive housing, which is, it can be exactly as you described, but supportive housing generally comes with some additional wraparound services, access to counsellors and those types of things. Our emergency shelters are exactly what they say, temporary shelter on an emergency basis, which is why they don't fall under the Residential Tenancies Act. But supportive housing, as I first described, would fall under the Act. So I need to make sure that I'm making reference to specifically what you're dealing with. So you are talking about an emergency shelter.
No, I'm talking about support. So I was in an emergency shelter, but now I'm in supportive housing. Right now, paying rent.
And that should fall under the Act, absolutely. But the emergency shelters themselves do not.
Right.
Okay.
Right. Yeah. So why can't we have visitors in or whatever? And well, basically it's a bed sitting room on the floor with 13 other rooms in it. Why can't we have people with inside our own bed sitting room or room or whatever when there's no other space? And there's a little TV lounge out there, but like I said, it's only room enough maybe for 4 or 5 people. And if somebody else has somebody in there at the time, is there any reason why is the reason that we're not allowed, say, to have a door stop on the door? If they walk by, they can see us in here, right? And have somebody in.
Yeah, I don't know. I guess we can opine that there's been instances in the past where a tenant would have others in, and the next thing you know, there's a problem which maybe creates a dangerous situation or beats the place up. I guess it's something based on that. But, not every person living in supportive housing is the same. And, whether or not we give people an opportunity to prove that they can be trusted with having someone in or whatever the case may be versus just disallowing it from the onset. I get that point.
Yeah. Yeah, that's basically what I'm asking. Give us a chance or whatever to prove them wrong or whatever. If you screw up, they kick us out or whatever. But as far as I'm concerned, I won't screw up or anybody that I have in, like, whether it be my stepson or anybody, any family member or whatever. They're not going to beat the place up or whatever or anything, right? So give us that chance. But they're not willing or giving us that chance, right?
Yeah, even if it's one strike, you're out. You know?
Yeah, exactly, yeah.
Yeah, fair enough, Keith, because you're right. Sometimes everybody living in one circumstance or one predicament or another, people view them as all being the same, and you can't be trusted, and you're a criminal in waiting, and all these types of things, which doesn't have to be the case. So judging book by its covers generally leads to bad decisions, generally leads to bad policy, but I understand where you're coming from.
Yeah, we'd like to get a hold of Paul Davis or whatever. I'm going to try and get a hold of him sometime this week, along with some other residents, to see if something can be worked out here, right?
Yeah,
because it is a difficult situation, right?
I don't know who has the authority. Say if it's a privately owned home where government supports are in place, who has the authority to make the rules? I really don't know the answer to that question, Keith, but I can try to figure that out. But I understand your concern this morning, and I appreciate your time. How you doing?
Good, excellent, or whatever. Just out searching for a regular apartment now or whatever, and hopefully something will become available, whether it be with the new homes that the government and the city are trying to build or whatever for low-income individuals, and hopefully things will look up after that, right?
Well, I hope they do, and hope you continue to keep your nose clean, and I appreciate your time.
Yeah, okay, great. Thanks, Patty.
You're welcome. All the best. Bye-bye.
Okay, you too. Bye-bye.
Yeah, and you have to guess that some of these decisions are born from past experience, because it's likely the case where if you open up the so-called floodgates, then the next thing you know, you could create problems for yourself and the homeowners and the residents because of the obvious aforementioned concerns. Let's check in on the Twitter box. We're VOCM Open Line. You know what to do. I was trying to remember who said that Twitter box. Was that then Minister O'Brien from Central? I think he said it once in the House of Assembly. I've latched onto it ever since. We're VOCM Open Line. You know what to do. Follow us there. Questions, thoughts, concerns, you know you can offer them there or via email. We're openline@vocm.com. All right, so recent court decision has now determined that the Holy Rosary Church out in the community of Portugal Cove St. Philip's is under the control and ownership of the Roman Catholic Episcopal Corporation. Even after a group in Portugal Cove South raised somewhere in excess of $130,000 just as recently as I believe like 2022 to do some work on the church, that wasn't good enough for the judge. Join us on the line number 3, as a matter of fact, is the Mayor of Portugal Cove South. That's Clarence Malloy. He's next, then you. Don't go away. Welcome back to the show. Let's go to line number 3. Say good morning to the Mayor of Portugal Cove South. That's Clarence Malloy. Mayor Malloy, you're on the air.
Good morning, Betty.
Welcome to the show, sir.
How are you? Yes, it's a lovely morning here in Portugal Cove South.
Yeah, same here in town, thankfully. So all that means, though, is I got to do the painting I've been pushing aside. Okay, let's dig into it. So, of course, to go back to the beginning here, when the Roman Catholic Episcopal Corporation decided how to sell off church properties, parish halls, and the like for compensation for the Mount Cashel victims, your community said, not here. Changed the locks on the doors and told potential investors that you're not welcome. Then it went to court. And now the court has ruled that the Episcopal Corporation has the ownership of the church so they can do what they want. And they've told your folks to stand down. Initial reaction before we get into what this means.
Yes, well, we're very disappointed now. We accept, the court, the judge's decision, but we're not happy with the outcome. But so I've been here all my life in Portugal Cove South, but I'm not speaking on behalf of the board now. I'm just speaking on behalf, I guess, of Clarence Moore. I am the mayor, but I'm not chairperson of the board. But I guess we haven't got so much options. I guess well you could appeal it. You have 30 days to appeal, but I don't know. But we've worked hard and we've raised a lot of money and done up our little church, and we were hoping to be able to keep it. But things don't seem to be going in our favour.
Obviously not. So, in simple terms, does this just mean simply that the church can do exactly what it likes here, and that it will be sold, and it's as fundamental as that?
Well, it seems that way, Now, we had signs in the church saying, that our church is not for sale. So after the court decision, I went up and I removed the signs from the church. But we meet as a board on Sunday, and I think we might be scheduled for another meeting. So we're still wondering, if there's other things we could do, but. I guess we accept the outcome, and I guess we'll have to. I suppose it don't mean that the church will be sold, even though that, it's up for sale again. But if anybody will buy it, we don't know that type thing, But I guess if somebody buys it, we'll have to. Live with it,
There's been a dramatic price reduction too. I think it's on the market now for less than $40,000, isn't it?
The last I heard, I think it was 37,000 or 39,000 or something like that. Yes.
Is the community considering buying it themselves?
No, we're not. We're after. It's been a long thing. I mean, the first thing what happened here in our parish, they took 46,000 out of our bank account. Out of the parish bank account, here in the small communities of Trapasty, St. Chats, and Portugal Cove, and then they sold the church in St. Chats, they sold the priest house in Trapasty, and Trapasty Church is still, trying to be sold, right? It's devastating for us small communities, right?
And like I've mentioned in the past, the fact that this had to happen, as opposed to the Vatican and the wealth it sits on, to acknowledge their sins and to pay their bill, it's a real shame. Even if people aren't church-going folks and faithful parishioners or congregants, must be able to recognise what this means for a small community. Now, Mayor Malloy, the concept of someone buying it for whatever purpose, do you have any thoughts or concerns about how they may or may not be welcomed in the community?
I don't know where we are. People, we're very friendly and welcomes everybody in our community. So I don't know how that'll turn out, but that's what we had said, that we wouldn't welcome anybody to buy the church, and we were hoping that nobody would buy it. We did have a couple of different people or 2 or 3 different people that looked at the church originally, and I opened the church to let them see it back in. And one guy, he was going to buy the church, but he wanted us to pay the insurance, pay the light bill, and we could use it. He said, as long, but we didn't fall for that, and so I guess we haven't got a whole lot of options, now. But our church was in very bad shape, and that it wasn't worth very much money, and we went, and we were kind of asked by the parish priest, are you going to let your church fall down, or are you going to get together and see what we can do with it? So we got together and we raised a lot of money, and people donated the windows. We have little plaques in our church saying, some ward family on behalf of their parents, bought this $1,000 window for church, or there's probably 6, 7 windows or whatever in the door, and other people bought. I know me and my wife, we donated $2,000 on behalf of our parents and her parents, and everybody. And then we had the Chase Days. We raised money and sold tickets. We had breakfast with Santa Claus, and we done what we could, and got the church fixed up. And then now all of a sudden things turned around and they're selling all the churches, right? Not only up here, but all in the things on the Avalon,
Yeah, they're all gone. It's remarkable. And, this is not necessarily something for you to have to react to, but, they've raised about $40 million, and currently the compensation ruling is over $100 million. You wonder what next steps are here. The government's been very quiet on that front, but someone's going to pay the bill, and I understand why someone has to pay that bill, but looks like it's going to be all of us, in addition to folks like yourself who've lost your church and the priest house in Trapasty and this church in St. Shots. And Terrible outcome. Anything else you'd like to offer this morning, Mayor Malloy?
Well, nothing else, but we are a nice little community here, Paddy, and we have a few things going for us. We have, we have a mistaken point, and that was our tours are going again this year. They have guided tours every day, and there's a nice lot of people next door to me. There's 3 cabins, and they were full last night. And we have our own fire department, and we have our own council, and we have, and it's a nice little community here. And it's too bad that we're going to lose our church, and I hope, and I don't know what options we have, but anyway, we're still here, and we're getting smaller, but and not much else you can say. We just this past month we just lost 3 people from the community, and another gentleman now that's just passed away, small communities are dying out, but we're trying to keep going, and we do have lots. We have 50 plus in the Lions Club, and we have dances, and everybody seems to be doing everything, and we're not dead.
No, I don't think you are, and I've been to Portugal Gulf South many times. Beautiful community. I know you don't have these numbers, Tipperong, but is there a lot of traffic coming in and out of Mistaken Point? Because it's an unbelievable place, a real eye-opening place. It's a UNESCO World Heritage Site.
Yes, and I think they're booked right up now for the summer, and I noticed he passes out here where I live. I just live right on where the road goes out to a Mistaken Point to Cape Race, and there's seeing going 6 or 7 cars behind the tour guides, and they're fairly, looks good for the summer, and they had a lot of visitors last year. And Cape Race, it's a historic place itself, right? With the Titanic and the wireless, Marrick wireless station. But the thing is, too, Paddy, it's funny. The board at Mistaken Point, they applied this past 3 years. Applied for students. They applied for 6 students, and they were granted 2. And here you have an organisation like the Lions Club in Trapassi applies for projects for 6 and gets 6, and sometimes have fairly little thing to do type thing, But I don't know where the people that makes the decisions. Here we are almost begging to try to get students to open. We never got to open Cape Race last year out to the visitor centre around the Cape till July, because you just can't. And can't get workers. We can't get and we're on profit thing there. But the ones that the government looks after, the Mistaken Point tours, they rent a room from our building over there. But there's a struggle, in those places to get things, and it seems like it's hard. You phone up, they're talking to the lady over there, and you're fighting, to you think to be a top priority with them to give you whatever they could to help,
You would think. So when you say open Cape Race, are you talking about the lighthouse or just the whole peninsula?
No, well, Cape Race now it's just past where you go to Mistaken Point. Have you been out to Cape Race itself?
I have, so yeah.
Yeah, well, there's a wireless station there, where they received the distress signal from the Titanic.
Yeah.
And there's a little gift shop there, and they have all kinds of stuff about the Titanic. Pictures and all the names of the Titanic and the picture of the Titanic, and I'm not a real good person to be talking about it, but it's really surprising that last year I was walking and I met this gentleman who was up here. He came up here from New York, and he went out there and he told me his grandmother's name on it, that she was I think a survivor of the Titanic,
Amazing.
Excited,
Yeah, it was like 15 years ago. There was still, I can't remember what it was called, but a transmitter was a big part of navigation later. I think that was decommissioned maybe 15 years ago or so, which was also an interesting real application out on Cape Race. It's good to have you on the show, Mayor Malloy. I'm sorry about the court ruling, but good to have you on. Stay in touch.
Oh yes, and we're alive and well up here.
Good news. Glad to hear it.
Thanks, Paddy.
You're welcome.
You're a good support to us. Yeah.
Happy to help, sir. All the best. Bye-bye. It's Clarence Malloy, the Mayor of Portugal Cove South. Portugal Cove South. I almost said Portugal Cove South, St. Phillips. All right, let's take a break. Don't go away.
You're listening to a rebroadcast of VOCM Open Line. Have your say by calling 709-273-5211 or 1-888-590-8626 and listen live weekday mornings at 9 a.m.
Welcome back to the show. Jerry Prouty just recently completed a 5-year appointment as the chair of the largest energy regulator in North America. That's the Alberta Energy Regulator. He's also the 40 years of experience in the energy industry. He's the president of the Collaborative Canadian Energy Solutions and joins us on line number 7. Good morning, Jerry. You're on the air.
Good morning, Patty. How are you?
I'm very well. Thanks for asking, sir. Thanks for making time for the program.
No problem.
So we know the Atlantic Chamber of Commerce has their annual conference today and tomorrow here in the City of St. John's. What are you presenting?
I'm actually not presenting directly. I did present to the Atlantic Chamber Board at their annual board meeting just before Christmas, and I'm here primarily in the role of speaking in a fireside chat format with Candice Lang, the new CEO of the Canadian Chamber of Commerce, who's speaking tomorrow morning. So Candice and I will take about an hour talking about the issues affecting Canada and Newfoundland, Labrador tomorrow morning. So that's what I'm here for.
Where should we start? Because I know in your past experience, one of the co-founders of the Canadian Association of Petroleum Producers, we have the Prime Minister floating the concept of an energy corridor. So where would you like to start this conversation? Because I have a dozen angles I'd like to take.
Well, I'd love to talk about the importance of the changes that are required for resource development, energy development in Canada from the perspective of Newfoundland and Labrador. I've been to the island several times. First time was back in 1980 where I worked with Vic Young and Frank Coleman at Newfoundland Labrador Hydro, and we're talking about different ways that they can expand their markets and price their product and move forward. This province has so much potential, and a lot of it's been restricted over the last 10 years by the Trudeau government in their inability to support resource development. That's really affected the Canadian economy. That's what I'm hoping we're going to see with the new government. We've heard some positive things initially, Patty, from the Prime Minister, but we need to see action now.
It's an interesting topic because people point to Bills 48 and 69. 69, when initially introduced, was extremely problematic with timelines associated with environmental assessment. It has adjusted back to more realistic timeframes at this moment in time. But curiously, in this province, there's been a dearth of exploration. Only one well drilled last year, and it came up dry. No actual commodified hydrocarbons were identified. But we have this massive oil field that Equinor owns out of Bay du Nord. But they're talking about a business model to make it work. They haven't leaned in on regulatory issues or regulatory certainty. So where do you think we're actually missing the boat here?
I really think that we've got so many hurdles that companies have to overcome to get their projects approved. And what's involved with each hurdle is not necessarily the specifics around the issues being raised, but the timeline. It just takes forever to get through the system. So you've got jurisdictions that with the crisis that we've seen with Russia invading Ukraine, Germany was able to get LNG facilities, for example, built within several months, approved and built literally within a year. Canada doesn't have to move at that pace, but we have to move much faster than we do now. And the act you talk about, the the Impact Assessment Act, the Supreme Court found it basically to be 85% of it be unconstitutional. The federal government did respond and made some changes, but there's still problems with it, and it needs to have further change. Personally, I think the government should throw it out, rely on the provinces for environmental oversight, and then work through a bill that where they have federal jurisdiction, they can focus on and do it efficiently and smoothly.
If the LNG conversation, for instance, when the government said there's no business model, it's not really up to the government to decide that. That's up to the private sector and the lenders to decide that, I would suggest. But LNG is a fascinating conversation in this province. We're sitting on trillions of cubic feet, and many of the oil producers out there, if they could make a go at it, a profit at it, they would be producing it. I've seen reports that it makes it around $6 per MMBTU. We're nowhere near that, because now we're just re-injecting it to help force the oil out, or it gets flamed out into the night sky. So So there's a business model concern there. And on the national front, because I know you're talking about national policies here, like we know Kitimat is up and running now. I know that Wood Fibre LNG up in Squamish has just taken receipt of their first 7 specialised LNG modules. So they're moving forward. There's a handful of other LNG projects that have been approved in this country that they haven't been able to either A, secure a market, which that should be the easy part, and B, raise the capital. So help us understand the disconnect between policy concerns and the projects that are approved that are not moving forward.
Well, it's just recently that you've mentioned, Patty, that those projects have moved forward, and that's really promising for the country. But those have taken such a huge time to get through the system. And then on the oil side, the Trans Mountain Pipeline, the expansion, it was already there in place. The expansion of it took 14 years from original concept through the regulatory process to get approved. The federal government had to buy it. That's not an environment that attracts foreign investors. What we need is really for the Prime Minister and the Cabinet and the new Energy Minister to say, we're open for business. We're going to have one area of project approval, one organization to approve it. We'll help you through all the different elements of the federal process, and we're not going to ignore the environment or ignore the social issues that come with these projects, but we're going to do it in a streamlined fashion, and you can have confidence that the projects will be approved, because companies do not want capital just sitting there and waiting as they go through the process. I think if we demonstrate that with those LNG projects you mentioned, and then look at other possibilities and critical mines, we have such Newfoundland, Labrador in particular, has so much critical minerals to develop that you'll see the investment come back very quickly.
Yeah, and I mentioned Kitimat. Of course, that's LNG Canada. They have Energy Canada Phase 2 that has been approved but has not been advanced as of yet. I don't know the reasons why, but it's actually part of it. And I'm not telling you something you don't know, but the twinning of the Trans Mountain, it wasn't the government shut it down. The court shut it down. And the court shut it down based on agreements of consultation with First Nations and provinces that was actually brought forward by the Harper government, 15, 20 years ago. So the court shut that down, not necessarily the government itself. In the world of pipelines,
I wouldn't disagree with that at all, Patty. I'd say that the Harper government, when they introduced the ability of cabinet to get involved in project approvals, when the Trudeau government came in, they took that power that Harper introduced and they used that to shut down the Gateway project, which had been approved by the regulator, was ready to move forward. So there's a lot of parties involved, even beyond the courts. The environmental groups have been very successful in the case of Trans Mountain to slow that project down, to introduce delay, to add costs by having the regulator cease operation to deal with environmental issues that have been found along the pipeline route.
There's lots of reasons as to why the twinning of Trans Mountain ended up costing taxpayers $34 billion. Still not running at full capacity. Some concerns, whether it be with tolls and otherwise, but that's a thing. Then the pipeline has become a massive conversation in this country, mostly because of Western Canada. So as a founding member of CAP, we talk about the death of the industry. When Brian Jean himself in Alberta just last week or the week before said, and this is the facts coming from CAP and others, record production, record revenue, record profit. I wish my industry was getting killed like that. So in the world of pipelines, do we see out there proponents that have business models that work, that make sense to add to the pipeline capacity that's already in the country?
Well, you definitely have to have the partnership between not just the producers who have the resource and the provinces that have the resources to develop, but you need the pipeline companies coming forward with projects. A good example is Keystone that goes down into the U.S. There's been a number of different organizations said we should revitalize Keystone with this new administration in the U.S., but the companies are saying, they've written off so many billions of dollars in investment because that project's failed twice. There's a real reluctance by those transmission and transportation companies themselves to take on the risk associated with these projects. So it's going to need all the participants from the industry as well as all the provincial governments and the federal government to move these projects along with a commitment to say, this is in the national interest. We're going to develop this. We're going to build this. And I think there's a potential to see that moving forward, Patty, now with this new government, but we just have to wait and see. We should have a good idea over the course of the next few months whether this is going to work or not.
Yeah, Yeah, I mean, Keystone was shut down by the Biden administration, and they said they were going to do exactly that. Yet Premier Kenny and the province of Alberta spent $1 billion knowing it was going to get shut down if the Democrats won that presidential election all those years back. There's a lot to this conversation. Energy corridor. You need federal guidance, you need regulatory certainty, whether it be for pipelines or electricity to be transmitted. But then it's the complication. I won't lean in on First Nations, which is absolutely part of it, is provincial jurisdiction. People talk about, well, Quebec is going to shut down any potential, like for Energy East. And pretty much Mayor Denny Cordair in Montreal was largely responsible for delaying that and threatened to shut it down, and consequently the business model eroded. Where does provincial jurisdiction play a role here? Because even if I'm Albertan and I'm thinking about access to the Irving refinery and Energy East pipeline, the provinces still are going to have some sort of say here. So as much as the feds are the keeper of the regulations and the regulatory framework, provinces still play a role. How does that get addressed, pragmatically speaking?
Great question. So, and it ties into the issues around interprovincial trade. Provinces absolutely have a role to play if any pipeline or transmission line is coming into their jurisdiction. What you need is agreement at the First Minister's level, the Prime Minister and the Premiers, to say we're going to have national corridors where it's going to be in the public interest for all of Canada to move these products coast to coast. And you're seeing at least verbal commitments that we're going to move down that path. But when it comes time to actually construct and build and put the regulatory application in, that's where you start seeing the difficulties. So we just have to, they're going to have to test the system by moving them forward.
Whether or not people want to admit it, this, generally speaking, we'll have environmental concerns that are completely legitimate, have to be addressed, but in large part it boils back to money. Do you think there's going to have to be some sort of federal royalty regime created so that provinces can be convinced or enticed or have their arm twisted based on royalty coming from the oil companies themselves and or the federal government? Because money will talk here.
Money will talk, but boy, if you're waiting for some type of magical federal program to expedite projects, I just don't see it happening. The country is in a very difficult fiscal situation, and we just need to get investment in economic development going in all these areas, not just energy, across the whole spectrum. So I don't see that, frankly, myself. I think you're just going to need the private sector will come forward if they have the certainty. The approvals will come forward, and they'll be able to move forward quickly on these projects, and that's what they need.
Jerry, last one. So we can talk about the different governments, and we have a confederation, but we very much have a focus on regional politics. Do you think in the big scheme of things we get an accurate depiction of the state of the industry, whether it be oil, whether it be hydro, whether it be interprovincial trade? Because where you stand in large part depends on where you sit. So political agendas will be driven by what's best for one province versus another. So I guess the summary question is, do you think we actually have an accurate picture of energy, whether it be production and exploration? Because it depends on who you ask. I mean, the industry is doing extremely well. And we all just chipped in on a pipeline. And we know the LNG facilities are up and moving. So from the politics to the business side, do you think people as Canadians in general have a clear, accurate picture of exactly what's going on versus following whatever side of the political spectrum they're on?
Another good question. I think Canadians understand that this country is blessed with resources like no other. What people maybe are not as clear about is, what have we done with those resources? Sure, there's been development in terms of our north-south plumbing in the continent between Canada and the U.S., and historically that's been something we've relied on, maybe not now, given the occurrences of the Trump administration. But what they don't realize is when you talk about something like LNG, we have not taken advantage of what the world needs, which is good, clean Canadian natural gas out of any region of the country. And so while we have those domestic markets to develop, those markets in the U.S., we missed out on the international piece that Australia and obviously the Middle East countries have achieved. What Canadians need to understand is, what is the potential? What can we do now moving forward? Not just in oil and natural gas, but in hydro and critical minerals and all those other resources. So that's what I'm looking forward is for people to really understand, and that's part of what we're doing at these events like the Atlantic Chamber meeting, is what is the potential? Let's get after it. Let's do it, because that's where the growth in the country and the wealth will occur.
It's good to have you on the show, Jerry. And just a wisecrack before we go. If we're looking for certainty, regulatory or otherwise, south of the border might not be the home.
No, that is something everyone's focused on. At the end of the day, 10 years from now, 20 years after you and I are both long gone, Patty, our biggest trading partner will still be the U.S. We just have to get through this period and move on. There's going to be strength there long term.
Because it just makes sense geographically, logistically, economically. We're intertwined, like it or not. Jerry, great to have you on. Appreciate your time, sir.
Thank you.
Take care.
Patty.
Bye-bye. It's Jerry Proddy, the president of the Collaborative Canadian Energy Solutions. Let's take a break. Don't go away. Welcome back to the show. Let's go to line number 3. Taking more to the president of Avalon Trailways. That's Rick Nosworthy. Rick, you're on the air.
Good morning, Patty. How are you?
Excellent today. How about you?
Good. Appreciate the opportunity to speak.
No problem. So yesterday in the press conference, on top of the advice for folks who are operators and the parents of operators, what my takeaway from your comments, Rick, was you're fed up. You're frustrated to no end with what's going on out there. Is that fair characterization?
Yes, Patty, that is quite fair, and it's not just me. Like my heart goes out to a guy like Mayor Bobbitt. My organization will come to him eventually and look to increase an ATV trail in Paradise or to do something like that. And how can we go to him or any council and not just my group, any trail group, and go and ask can we expand the ATVs when they're dealing with stuff like this? It's certainly making it very difficult for trail users and trail groups. And, Patty, this is definitely a dark side with some of that stuff that's been happening with, parents and kids. But there's some tremendous stuff being done on the trail networks here in this province. We got the Southern Shore Group put in a world-class trail. There's trails going down now in Carbonear. The Stoneville Federation are expanding their trails. My own association, Newfoundland Trailway Council, are moving ahead at a rate that we've never moved ahead at before. So it's all going good, but we're getting sick of this stuff that is so preventable.
And it's stuff that's happening, I would suggest, with the slim minority of ATV operators. I don't know what the numbers would be, but it doesn't seem to me that the riders themselves in large percentages are the problem. It really feels like it's the outliers that are creating all the headlines and creating all the problems. What do you think?
For sure, Patty. A real ATVer don't tear up a golf course.
Yeah.
There's no thrill in ATVing tearing up a golf course or doing donuts in a soccer field. A real ATVer and an enthusiast and people that take this as a family sport, they'll go off, they'll go fishing, they'll go on the trailway, they'll go down towards Trepassey. There's so many places to go. They'll turn it into a fun, family, safe activity. And, what we're seeing there, these aren't ATVers, these are idiots on an ATV.
So I guess the fundamental question is, what can actually be done about it? Like in this case where the child clipped someone getting off the school bus, the parent was charged because the kid was unsupervised. I get it. The whole tough on crime thing is debatable as to whether or not it works. But are we in the world now where people need to be caught and we need to take their bikes for extended amounts of time? Or what is part of the solution here? Because education and awareness campaigns, for folks who are willing to rip up a golf course, you can talk to them till you're blue in the face. It's not going to change their attitude. So what do we actually have to do here?
You're right. The education part is gone. Everybody knows you don't tear up a golf course. And everybody should know, every responsible parent should know that, what their child is capable of. And, how much did a parent miss to think that their child would go through a red light with 2 passengers and pass a school bus? That's certainly somebody that or did not evaluate the level of maturity. And Patty, I'm not defending anybody's actions, but what happens, these young adults and kids, a lot of them are only doing what kids do. And it's up to the parent to control that. And Patty, I'll give you a perfect example. It's humorous, but it's a perfect example. I got an 8-year-old grandson. this winter, myself and him went down in the backyard and we made a snowman. We took the snowman and we painted him with painted a face on him and did the whole thing with a can of spray paint. The last snowstorm, the very last one, he came up. He said, "Papi, can I have some spray paint?" So I gave him the spray paint. I was watching out in the backyard, but not watching him properly. I go down in the backyard, and he painted the retaining wall. Now, to me, that's only doing what an 8-year-old to do. Right? That's my fault. You give a spray paint to an 8-year-old, what do you expect? And it's the same thing. When you give an ATV to a child, what do you expect? They're only doing what a child to do. And it's the parent's job to make sure they don't do it. It's as simple as that. Parents have a role. And when they step outside their role, it certainly has to be some sort of consequence.
Absolutely, and I think that could be said for all of our children's behaviours in school, at the field parties, on their ATV, whatever the case might be. Rick, before I get to the news, any final message you'd like to offer?
Guys, be a parent. Step up, do the right thing. You don't have to be the nice guy all the time. It's not right to have young children unsupervised on these ATVs. And, of course, always wear your helmet, wear a seatbelt.
Appreciate the time, Rick. Thank you.
Thanks, Paddy. Appreciate it. Bye-bye.
You're welcome. Bye-bye. It's Rick Noseworthy, President of Avalon Trailways. All right, it's time for the news. When we come back, we're talking about trade, mental health services, provincial park bookings, whatever you want to talk about. Don't go away.
The Tim Powers Show. Join the conversation weekday afternoons at 4 p.m. on your VOCM.
Welcome back. Let's go to line number 2. Good morning, Henry. You're on the air.
Good morning, Paddy. How are you?
I'm doing well. How about you?
I've had better days, Paddy.
What's happening?
I'm lost. I'm confused. I need some guidance. For not me, my girlfriend, actually. She's having issues adjusting with, life and taking on responsibilities and things like this, but it didn't start there. She's had a lot of trauma in her life, and we won't get into that. On Saturday, she decided that she had enough daily breakdowns. She wanted to go get help. So Sunday, she decided she was ready to go to the hospital and basically admit herself in somewhere to get the proper treatment that she would need. Previously, she's gone to Eastern Health and spoke to counselors, where counselors have taken her and sent her to the emergency room because they couldn't help her. So she's had several trips to the emergency room now in the last few weeks. In the last few days, they convinced her to go to Grace Sparks' facility, where basically they summed it up to me and her were having a lot of arguments, and they thought I was kicking her out, or she thought I was kicking her out. No way means was I kicking her out. She left to go get the help that she so desperately needs. And when she went to get the help, they took her in, they refilled her pills, and told her she was good to go. And I wasn't satisfied with that. So I did make her stay at the Muir Peninsula facility for the remainder of the night so that they could keep an eye on her and see how she was doing. The next morning when she spoke to the counselors, they sent her to Grace Sparks. Well, at Grace Sparks, she done some self-harm. She's no longer allowed there. They basically told her this morning, asked her when she woke up if she was still feeling suicidal or not, and if she had anywhere to go. Where she was so confused just waking up and being presented with this, she didn't know. So being in contact with me, I told her, Haley, I never did kick you out. You're more than welcome to come back and stay here. It's just that now I have a 3.5-year-old as well that the workers basically looked at me and said, if we feel that she is putting your daughter in any harm's way, we'll come take your daughter. Now, Patty, she just done self-harm, and they released her the next day. I thought that if somebody done self-harm like this, they would have to take them into a psychiatric evaluation right away, immediately, not release them back onto the streets.
Just a quick question, Henry. My understanding is Grace Sparks' house is for women with or without children who are experiencing violence or abuse. So why was she sent there anyway?
Exactly. Good question, Patty. I couldn't be 100% to tell you why, other than they needed to place her somewhere, and they placed her there. And as far as I know, the reasoning for placing her there was they told the Grace Sparks facility that she was having a lot of arguments in her relationship and a lot of fighting, and I had kicked her out, which was totally bogus. I did not kick her out. She left to go get the help she needed. I had to call the ambulance for her on Sunday to come pick her up. She was after doing a little bit of self-harm at that time, but nothing to the extent that she had done while in the Grace Sparks facility.
There are a couple of options on the Burin Peninsula. There's a mental health and addictions, I think it's called a wellness resource centre. That's in the health centre of Grand Bank. I can't remember what that hospital is called, but there's a Doorways walk-in in St. Lawrence. There's another one in Marystown. So there are some supports on the peninsula that sounds like would be more appropriate than Grace Sparks' house for your girlfriend.
Well, what she wanted was basically like a rehabilitation center. That's what she was going in and asking for, to be sent somewhere for mental health treatment on a long-term basis where she could be put under 24/7 supervision for at least 30 days, at least have a psychiatric evaluation done.
Can I give you a number to the facility in Grand Bank, what might be the first step for getting an assessment and for long-term care? There's a primary healthcare team on site there, and they do deal with mental health and addictions. So I have a number if you'd like to at least start the process or have a better understanding of what you could or should be doing.
Yes, indeed.
Okay, so obviously it's 709
yes
832 1602.
Okay.
So they'll have the professionals on site that can help walk you through what you can do in an effort to help your girlfriend, as opposed to Grace Sparks' house, which are simply not. That's not their bailiwick. That's not what they do. So make that call. If you don't have any luck with them, you get back to me. I'll try to give you some more options.
I will indeed. Thank you, Patty.
You're welcome. Good luck. Keep me in the loop.
I will.
Okay, Henry. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Yeah, how she ended up at Grace Sparks' house is confusing, because that's like, it's like Irish Scurvy. It's for battered women experiencing abuse or violence, intimate partner or otherwise. So I'm not sure why that happened. Let's take a final break in the morning. When we come back, we're talking about trade. And Carolyn, you stay right there. Also talk about provincial park bookings. Don't go away. Welcome back to the show. Let's go to line number one. Say good morning to the independent member of the House of Assembly, Mount Pearl, Southland, Paul Lane. Paul, you're on the air.
Good morning, Patty.
Good morning, Paul. You're on hold. Compromised phone line. My apologies. Let's go to line number 4. Carolyn, you're on the air.
Hi, Patty. How are you?
I'm very well. How about you?
Good. I'm calling regarding provincial parks bookings. I'm just recently getting back into the camping scene after about 15 years away from it. And I went online on May to book provincial parks like normal. Never made any headway.
Well, that was helpful. Not sure what happened there. I didn't press anything. Call simply dropped. I think that might have been a cell phone connection issue. Is that Mr. Lane on too? Let's see if we have a clearer line with Paul on line number 2. Paul Lane, you're on the air.
Good morning, Patty. How are you this morning?
That's kind. You?
Perfect. Patty, I guess I just wanted to chat briefly about the ongoing situation with our neighbours to the south, and of course I was listening to your conversation earlier with that gentleman talking about oil and gas production and so on, and I guess the fact that, from a not just a historical but from a logistical, from a geographical point of view, trade with the U.S. has always, and I guess will always, make sense, and hopefully we can after the next 3 years, we'll see that change in administration, and hopefully the next president of the United States will be, a lot more sensible and I guess like his predecessors, but there's never any guarantees of that, of course, and I think one thing we've learned from this Trump administration is the fact that one of the mistakes perhaps we have made, albeit I understand how it happened, was putting all of our eggs into the one basket. And we heard the Prime Minister, and certainly we heard our former Premier, espousing the need to diversify, to find new trading partners, to do more interprovincial trade, and of course to buy local, buy Canadian, and so on. And we had this big splash at the urban market. I can recall a few months ago with the Premier, and there was a number of his caucus members and cabinet members, and they were all jockeying for position to be on NTV News with him and so on, talking about the Buy Right Here campaign, or whatever it was called at the time. And I certainly supported all those initiatives, and I still do. But I guess what I'm kind of wondering is where we are to with it. I haven't heard a lot as of late. At one point, every time you went on social media, you would see that logo that looked like sort of like a broken Newfoundland flag logo that they had. And it was all over the place talking about, the need to buy local, buy Canadian, and so on. But I'm really not seeing a whole lot of that happening any longer. Certainly not seeing it on the government's social media in any big way, not seeing it in commercials in any big way. And when it comes to, for example, buying local and so on, I mean, I've had a couple of companies reach out to me lately, one in particular that lost a tender, the tender, when the tender came out to spec for the products that they were looking for, was based on a U.S. standard. So they couldn't even meet it because they were selling Canadian products and they couldn't meet this U.S. standard. So I'm just wondering, were we truly serious about all this, about diversifying, about interprovincial trade, about finding new markets, about buying local, or was this just, a sort of a flash-in-the-pan reaction with a cost, of course, to the taxpayer, to give this impression that we were all going to do everything we could to support Newfoundland and Labrador, to support Canada, to boycott the U.S. and so on. And now that we had that little splash for a couple of weeks, now it's all over. Money not well spent, I would suggest. And now we'll just go back to normal, back to the old habits of, and are we really making that effort? Is government really making that effort to avoid U.S. and to try to support Canada and support local the way it said it was going to? I haven't heard any updates, but I'd sure like to hear one.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have an answer to that question, but diversifying global markets isn't a switch that can get flipped. A government procurement, relying more and more on domestic is extremely important. That's something government has full control over. Interprovincial trade, like I mentioned off the top, BC is moving ahead in an agreement with Yukon for provision of hydroelectricity. We've signed an MOU with New Brunswick, which I don't know what that means necessarily. So you're right, there was a real moment of tizzy, however long it lasted, about, I hate the little catchphrases, but, buying local and all those things. On that front, I'll put this out because I saw someone mention it on social media. I've noticed it as well. Look, if you want to boycott travel to the United States, do whatever you want to do. If you don't want to buy American products, do whatever you want to do. That's a personal decision for me. In the grocery store, I'm now seeing products that are labeled product of Greece or Chile or Morocco. But if you look at the label of the product, it's made in the United States. So the retailers are not playing along here. People need to have informed decision-making available. So I know they don't want their produce and other products to rot on the shelves, but that's not my problem. That's their problem. For folks who are intent on buying locally as much as possible, products are Canada, made in Canada, not the Americans, you can do what you see fit, but come on, retailers, don't be mislabeling stuff because, your own bottom line, you don't want to be throwing things in the garbage. Again, not my responsibility. Their delivery should be in favor of their consumer, who pays their bills, who fuels the pockets of their investors. So just keep an eye for that if that's something important to you.
Yeah, no, I agree, Paddy. And of course, it's one thing to get the private sector on board, and certainly I think we would like to see them on board. And I'm not going to begrudge. I know people that will, price point will continue to be the thing, and I know people that continue to, and I know people who continue to go to Florida and all that stuff. And I'd love to go to Florida, to be honest with you. I'm used to going to Florida, a fair bit actually, but I've made the personal choice. I'm not going to do it. But if others make a different choice, that's up to them. But government are the ones who were really pushing this whole idea, and they should be leading by example. So when it comes to procurement, when it comes to, to this interprovincial trade, and even things like, we're spending, I can't remember the dollar amount now, but I'm pretty sure it's significantly over $1 million to set up a Boston office for a Newfoundland to have an office down in Boston. Now, the reason given, of course, is, well, we sell seafood to the U.S. It's important, and it is all important. But at a time when we've never ever had it before, and at a time when the President of the United States is, quite frankly, has little interest in fair negotiations with Canada on any products, I'm not sure this is the time that we wanted to spend $1 million or a couple $1 million, wherever it is, on an office in Boston. Let's wait until Trump is gone and we're back to normal, and then if it makes sense, go ahead. But anyway, I guess it's like a lot of things. It's similar to, I liken it to some degree. Okay. Every now and then in the House of Assembly we will have this motion about the fishery and the importance of standing up for the fishery. We'll all vote for it. We'll give ourselves a standing ovation, and then we do absolutely nothing after the fact. And this kind of feels like the same thing. So an update would be good.
Appreciate the time, Bob. I'm going to sneak out one more call, Paul.
Yep. Thank you, Paddy. All the very best. Have a great day.
Bye-bye. Okay. All right, final word goes to line number 1. Carolyn, you're on the air.
Hi, Patty. Sorry, I must have got cut off there earlier. But,
no problem.
On the heels of all that, talking about local Canada, what about local in our province? I tried to book campsites back on May 7 when the provincial park system opened up. I've been out of the camping game for about 15 years, but I'm getting back into it now. Just recently retired, planned on traveling across the island this summer. May 7th, went online. The booking system sucks online, the provincial park booking system. Every park showed everything full, couldn't get a site, couldn't get a service site anywhere. So gave up on that, booked a couple private parks, turned around yesterday, went online again, tried to book Loxton Path, which is out in Port Rexton. Couldn't do it online, called the actual park itself. The gentleman that I spoke with, I camped at Loxton for years and years and years. I only camped there, I think, maybe 3 times since they've had service sites. Anyway, he gave me a 1-800 number to call. He said he couldn't book directly. The online system they have problems with. So I called the 1-800 number, spoke to this lovely young lady. She was sweet and everything else. I could also tell that she was not from Newfoundland because of her accent, but that didn't mean that she wasn't in Newfoundland. Turned around, I asked her what the sites are like at Loxton. She said, well, ma'am, I'm not even in Newfoundland. And I said, excuse me? She said, oh, no. She said, the provincial parks are booked through our office here in Ontario.
Yep, it's been that way for a while.
I didn't know that. I was shocked and astounded. I couldn't believe it, and I'm floored. And I just, like I said, I've been out of the camping game for so long, and to find out that here we are crying out for unemployment rates so high here, and they contract out to Ontario to book provincial parks in our own province, that's bloody crazy, don't you think?
Absolutely. I mean, there are some things, like people talk about driver's licenses being printed in Quebec and all that kind of stuff.
Oh, yeah.
There's reasons for some things to be out of province, for security features and the already established opportunity for that to be printed there. But booking provincial parks can be done on Elizabeth Avenue. There's no reason why it can't be done. And I've actually chased the government on that one, and the reasons are nonsense.
Well, I tell you, I got the confirmation from her while I was speaking with her on the phone, and I thought it was funny because my sister-in-law lives in Barrie, actually. And while I'm planning on doing the province this year. Like I said, just recently retired, planning on camping across the province, get back into some of the places I used to go, but also see some new places. Then next year, my plan is to go across Canada and pick up my sister-in-law in Ontario, and she's supposed to go with me. May or may not happen. She's a principal at an elementary school, so who knows? She does have the summers off. So I said to her, I said, well, this young lady I spoke with yesterday, well, it's quite nice now, don't get me wrong. I said, well, funny thing, I said, my sister-in-law is in Ontario. She travels to B.C. quite a bit. And so, like, what happens there? She said, you tried to book a site here in Ontario. BC might be booking it for you.
Yeah.
I mean, how the hell does that make any bloody sense?
It doesn't to me, Carolyn. I'll give that another chase because the camping season is upon us. You've had the final word. I appreciate your time.
Thank you. I appreciate your time, Patty, and hopefully someone else will comment on it maybe tomorrow.
Hope so. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Take care. Bye-bye.
All right, good show today. Big thanks to all hands, and we will indeed pick up this conversation again tomorrow morning right here on VOCM and Big Land FM's Open Line. On behalf of the producer, David Williams, I'm your host, Paddy Daly. Have yourself a safe, fun, happy day. We'll talk in the morning. Bye-bye.